Ciao, it's Billy Luna. Today's episode is super cool. It involves the extended Goodfellas universe. When I say Goodfellas, I'm referring to the Martin Scorsese film Goodfellas, based on the book Wise Guy. Both the book and the screenplay for the movie, written by the great Nick Pileggi, involves the characters that you know and love from the movie and book. Henry Hill, played by Ray Liota, and Jimmy Burke, played by Robert Deniro. This episode involves how they went to Boston College and recruited some Boston College basketball players to fix basketball games through point shaving.
Billy Luna.
Henry Hill met a guy named Tony Perla through his various drug deals at the time. And Tony Perla had been cooking up this scheme with Boston College players to fix games. This scheme occurred during the 1978-79 basketball season at Boston College. Tony Perla cultivated this player on the team named Rick Kuhn. Kuhn was a Boston College basketball player, top rebounder, who had grown up with Tony Perla's brother Rocco. Kuhn was a good basketball player, excellent rebounder, and he wanted to make money. As we know, college athletes are not compensated, probably unfairly. So Perla had been cultivating him. He bought him a color TV, a car, had given him marijuana and cocaine, and he'd been basically kind of grooming him and seducing him, getting him positioned so that he could utilize him to shave points and fix college basketball games. Of course, one man on a basketball team can't really effectively influence the outcome most of the time. So Kuhn also brought in his good friend Jim Sweeney, who was the captain of the team. Then they had two prominent players can definitely impact the game. These two guys got together and said that maybe they could bring in a third player, and that for the small price of $2,500 per game, they could shave points and fix the game. Sweeney and Kuhn really dug this because they didn't have to lose. In fact, they just had to make sure that they didn't win the game by more than the point spread.
Billy Luna. Billy Luna.
Perla needed Henry Hill in the scheme because without Henry and the connections from Paul Vario and the Lucchese crime family, he wouldn't have been able to place the large amount of big money bets that they'd have to spread out around the country. As an additional advantage, if some of the bookies wanted to give Perla static or not pay him off, he'd be like, oh, okay, don't worry about it, that's okay. Just talk to my ferocious, super powerful mafia friends from New York. People would back off. People don't want that heat. They don't want that smoke. Actually, it's not really that easy to place a lot of big money bets on college basketball games. Bookies generally do it as a kind of a favor to their big clients that bet a lot of baseball or football. So, you have to have some juice to even be able to lay down these large money bets like this in the first place. So Henry would line up a string of between 14 and 20 bookmakers across the country, and he'd have to actually let some of them in on the fix so they could profit from it too. Paulie and Jimmy Burke just loved this because they just saw dollar signs. They're like, we can make a fortune with this. Plus, these kind of guys bet all the time, and there's nothing sweeter than beating a bookmaker in winning a bet. Paul Vario was the ultimate big boss over this whole thing. And, of course, as you know, he was played by Paul Sorvino in the movie Goodfellas. He's the consigliere for the Lucchese crime family. Really, really big, powerful guy. So Paulie turned the whole scheme over to his son Petey. And then Petey and Henry Hill flew to Boston to sit down with the players. They wanted to kind of feel this out. This is a very serious kind of action, and they are serious guys, and they wanted to meet these kids and make sure that they understood who they were dealing with.
Billy Luna.
Hill and Pete Vario met Rick Kuhn and Sweeney at the Sheraton at the Provincial Center in Boston. Kuhn and Sweeney were really nervous at first. Henry pulled them both one at a time into the next room and searched them, frisked them to make sure that they weren't wearing any recording devices. Then they chilled out a bit and they ordered everything expensive on the room service menu. Kuhn and Sweeney told Henry that they're big dogs on the college scene and big men on campus and big in the college basketball scene, but they didn't really think that they had what it takes to make it into the pros. And, they want to make some money. And in addition to the $2,500 that they wanted to fix the games, they also wanted Henry to get down bets for them on the game so that they could profit further. So Henry opened up by saying, hey, which games in the upcoming season do you think that you guys can shave points for? Sweeney and Kuhn pulled out a card that had the schedule of the Boston College team, and they circled all the games that they thought that they could fix effectively. The idea of just shaving points and not actually losing a game really appealed to these kids. The first game that they did as a test run with the kids was on December 6th. It was Boston College playing Providence. Jimmy Burke and Henry went to the game and they put a little bit of money on, but this is just a test run to make sure everything runs okay. Boston College was favored in this game by 7 points. The players got Henry some tickets and he went to the game. He was actually seated right behind Sweeney's family. And they were cheering, going crazy for their son playing in the game, Sweeney. Little did they know, he was fixing the game for the Mafia. Henry was enjoying the game, especially when Boston College got ahead by a couple of points. Henry started to relax. Henry's feeling like we did this, we made it, Providence is dead. Boston College is starting to accumulate some extra points. Sweeney's having the game of his career. He's hitting shots from everywhere. His parents that are right by Henry are going crazy. And then all of a sudden, Henry's getting a little nervous because he's doing a little too well. And he starts hitting points, and Henry's like, wait a second, slow down, kid. You're gonna blow the fix. Then it gets a little out of control. Sweeney's hitting shots everywhere, and he's really screwing up the fix. Now Henry's kind of getting pissed. Kuhn's trying to compensate. He's like throwing the ball away, missing passes, and trying to screw up intentionally to counterbalance Sweeney going off, screwing up their bet. Kuhn's is trying to help the cause, but Sweeney keeps on hitting shot after shot. Maybe he's, showing off for his family, but now Henry's getting really annoyed. All they needed for Henry and his friends to win the point shaving scheme is to have won the game by 7 points. But because Sweeney was just hitting everything in the world, they ended up winning by 19 points and screwing everything up. Henry was thinking, these kids are clowns. This is just a bunch of wasted time. This scheme was for nothing. They hadn't bet much money. They just did it as a test run. If Henry and his friends had bet money on this, big money like they intended to, they would have been whacked out because of it. Serious business, but the kids didn't take it seriously. Henry and Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario were really upset. And they told Perla, tell these kids, you're dealing with serious guys here. Dangerous people.
Billy Luna.
Perla let him know. You can't play basketball with broken hands. Rick Kuhn wanted to keep going with the scheme. And so he said to Henry, come on, we're playing Harvard. This next game is Harvard. We promise we'll throw it for you. Kuhn was really upset that Sweeney did him dirty like this, and he wanted to continue this. He wanted the money. They needed the money. So he went back to Henry and said, listen, Henry, come on. I promise I'll make it right. Don't give up on us. We're playing Harvard, and I can handle it. And Henry's like, I don't know. Your boy Sweeney screwed everything up. And Kuhn said, listen. I'm going to recruit Ernie Cobb, my good friend, into the scheme. He's the best player on the team. So between me, Sweeney, and Cobb, we can definitely fix this for you. And Henry said, all right, we'll give you one more chance. But you guys better not play games. We're not the type of people you play with. Kuhn said, Henry, please, believe me. I've got Cobb recruited into the scheme now. He's our team's best player. This is absolutely a sure thing. So December 16th rolls around, the game versus Harvard. Henry Hill, Jimmy Burke, Paul Vario put 25 grand on this game. The point spread was 12. They put all their money on Harvard, and they bet that Boston could not beat Harvard by any more than the 12-point spread. This time, the players did great. They threw away a ton of shots to keep the game score low, and in the end, they beat Harvard by only 3 points, giving Jimmy and Henry and Paul Vario a pretty good payday for their $25,000 bet. On December 23rd, Boston College was playing UCLA, where they were a big underdog. Because of the success of the previous game, Henry, Jimmy Burke, and Jimmy Vario and their boys bet $50,000 on the game. They placed their bet for $50,000 that Boston would get beaten by more than the 15-point spread. The Boston College players did really well for the Lucchese boys this time, and they managed to lose by 22 points, and they got a big payoff again. Henry was starting to feel like, this is starting to work out, man. I think we got a major cash cow on our hands with this little scheme. So everybody in the Lucchese family was just super stoked, and they were riding high over this whole thing. They were making a lot of money. The next game was on February 3rd against Fordham, and Henry Hill and his cohorts wanted to bet so much money on this game that they used up all of their bookie connections in New York City, and Henry sent a guy out to Las Vegas to put $55,000 down in additional bets in Vegas. In this bet, they were taking the underdog, Fordham, and they were saying that Boston College could not beat Fordham by the 13-point spread. Boston was a huge favorite in this game, so it just basically comes down to how many points the Boston College players want to win by. This should have been a huge payday for Henry and his boys. They should have just made a fortune on this. But just before the game was over, Henry got a phone call from the guy that he sent to Vegas to lay off an additional $55,000 in bets. He got caught up in traffic and he couldn't lay down the bets. Henry noted that this was a good thing that he called him in advance, because if he didn't, he might have gotten whacked over this. This was super disappointing to Henry and his people because they would have made hundreds of thousands of dollars on the bet, but fate intervened. The next game against St. John's, they marshaled their money and they put that down, but then that game turned out to be a push, which means that nobody can win on either side of the bet, so they didn't win anything. So the next game came up, Boston College versus Holy Cross. The guys marshaled all their money, they put it on. Holy Cross was the favorite. And all the Boston College guys had to do was ensure that they were beaten by at least 7 points. Henry and his boys had bet on Holy Cross to win by 7 points. This was the big one for Henry and Paulie and Jimmy Burke and the Lucchese's. They dumped all their money on it. They dumped even more money on it. And this was going to be the one, the really big payday. Henry went over to Jimmy Burke's house to watch the game. It was like a party, a festive environment. Everyone was so happy. They dumped so much money into this game, and they finally, had figured this out. The scheme was, this is going to be the big payoff for the scheme. Everything was going as planned. Holy Cross was winning throughout the game, just according to the plan. But toward the end of the game, the Boston College players started to rally. It almost seemed like they didn't want to lose by too much. Their pride was getting in the way. Then, fracturing this wonderful, wonderful event, the Boston College players keep scoring, and they start to come within a couple of points of the lead. As the clock started ticking down, the Boston College players started to try to miss things, but it was just too late. Suddenly, the Holy Cross players couldn't hit anything from anywhere on the court. And then the other Boston College players that weren't involved with this scheme started hitting shots. In the end, Holy Cross won, but only by 3 points. Henry and Jimmy Burke and all their boys were screwed over by the Boston College players. Jimmy Burke, the character in the movie played by Robert Deniro, went berserk. He got so furious, he kicked right into the TV set and imploded all over the room. He was in a murderous rage. Jimmy was thought to have at least personally bet $50,000 on that game. And remember, this is a long time ago when $50,000 was a lot more than it is now. Henry called Perla, and Perla said that he talked to Kuhn after the game, and Kuhn said, "Oh, it's a matter of pride. We couldn't lose by that much against Holy Cross." Jimmy and Henry and Paul Vario were furious. They were all in a murderous rage, and they started drinking, and then later that night, Jimmy and Henry were going to jump in the car and go up to Boston and lay a serious beating, if not kill the players. But they never did. They just watched their dream fade away in the distance. Didn't work out.
Billy Luna. This is Victoria Luna. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the videos, and share with your mates on social media. Check out these awesome videos now. Ciao.